They say the French Quarter breathes, and I believe it. Because that afternoon, it felt like someone put a hand over the city's mouth. Brass spilled out of a second, line down Chartres, drums rattling rib cages, bodies shoulder to shoulder under strings of beads that never come down. Humidity sat on us like a wet towel. I was off shift, still in my navy scrub pants because laundry day keeps losing fights with overtime, holding a beignet in one hand and my blue notebook in the other. The one I use when something tells me, Nora. Write it down before they call you crazy later. I thought I was over the panic stuff. Therapy, breathing exercises, counting tiles when a room starts shrinking. I thought crowds would be fine again. One day. Then somebody's hand slid along my waist like it had a right to check what I was made of. It was deliberate, not a bump, not a misstep. Fingers that lingered. My throat closed the way it did in that warehouse 2 years ago, when a bouncer pretended not to see. What I didn't expect was how fast the world narrowed. Sound turned to a muffled horn. Smell of fried dough went sour. And every face around me blurred except his. Tall, pale, expensive watch. A grin built to dare me to make a scene. "You okay, darling?" a trombone player asked without stopping the riff, eyes flicking from me to the man in back, like a tiny lighthouse in a storm. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. That's when the crowd parted wrong, like water going uphill, and a man I'd never seen before stepped between me and the hand that shouldn't have been there. One palm held low like he was calming a skittish horse. He smelled like river wind and cedar. He didn't touch me. He asked, quietly, "Do you want him away from you?" Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "What happened?" Just a yes-no switch I could flip without telling my whole past to a stranger. I nodded because my throat was a locked door. He turned his head half an inch, and I swear the air changed temperature. The grinning man lost the grin. Two guys I hadn't noticed, dock muscles, saints caps, drifted into place like shadows. And suddenly the space around me belonged to someone else. "Back it up," the stranger said, almost polite. The other man did, mumbling something about the parade's energy, trying to look bored. He wasn't. He was measuring the distance to run. The trombone slid into a lower note like the brass could tell which way the tide was going. I exhaled. I didn't faint. I didn't cry. I checked my hands for tremor the way I do before I start an IV on a hard stick. The stranger kept his body angled so the man had to look at him instead of me. "Thank you," I managed, voice rough with sugar and adrenaline. "I'm fine." "Maybe," the stranger said. His mouth didn't smile, but his eyes softened in a way that felt like a choice, not an accident. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brass token, old and smooth from 1,000 thumbs. A pelican stamped on one side, river coordinates on the other. He looped a thin leather cord through it, held the ends out. "This isn't a collar, it's a pass. On the river, it means someone sees you. You can hand it back in an hour or never, your call." I should have told him I don't wear other people's symbols. I should have said, "I don't know you." Instead, my fingers moved before my pride did, and the token settled cool against my wrist. The man who'd touched me had already melted into the French Quarter's brick and heat, the way people like that do when light hits them. "Yo, hey," a woman's voice cracked the spell. She was 60 plus, visor bedazzled with saint sequins. A tourist by the sandals, but not by her swagger. Her husband slumped in a folding chair near the curb, gray as the sky before a storm. He just said he was dizzy, and then I was moving before I thought about it. Beignet gone, notebook in my back pocket, dropping to my knees on cracked pavement. 2 fingers to carotid, breath check, chest rise shallow and slow. "Sir, can you hear me?" He blinked, tried to answer, failed. I flagged the trombone with one hand. "I need space." And those musicians became my perimeter like they'd trained for it. Somebody killed the music on a dime. And the crowd, God bless them, actually listened. "Any nitro, meds, history?" I asked the wife. And she dumped a gallon Ziploc of bottles into my lap like she'd been waiting her whole marriage to be asked. I sorted blind by habit. Labels under sweat. Spotted the beta blocker, the statin. No nitro. I thought I was about to be alone in this. Then a shadow dropped next to me and the stranger, still not touching me, held out a cold bottle of water and a neatly folded dish towel like a proper Southern mother. "For a cool compress," he said. Practical, not pushy. I pressed the towel to the man's neck, counted the breaths, listened to the new silence, like it could tell me if I was about to lose him. "Call 911, I told the wife. "Tell them chest pain, dizzy, shortness of breath, male late 60s, no nitro on hand." The wife's voice shook, but she nailed the script. When the first responder van tried to nose through the parade, the trombone band literally marched the crowd backward, parting a path with sousaphone authority. Somewhere in there, I started breathing like a person again. The EMTs took him, and the wife gripped my hands like I'd pulled him out of the river. "You're an angel," she said. "I'm not. I'm a trauma nurse who's had to prove she knows what she's doing since the day she showed up at St. Augustine with foster home clothes and a secondhand stethoscope." I thought about telling her that, but sometimes people need the myth more than the resume. "He's in good hands now," I said, and she kissed my cheek and hustled after the gurney. The horns eased back in, cautious, like the city was testing its voice. "You moved like you'd rehearsed this corner," I said to the stranger, finally standing. My knees were sugared in powdered sugar mud. Most people panic or try to film it. "Been around enough parades to learn who needs room and who needs a witness," he said. There was a faint edge on witness, like it meant more where he came from. "I'm Raphael." He waited, not forcing mine. The brass token warmed against my wrist. "Nora," I said. "And before you ask, yes, I'm fine. No, I don't need an escort. And I'm not signing up for a rescue." "Fair," he said. No flinch. "Then consider it a receipt. Next time someone tries your body without your permission, hold the token out. Someone of mine will see it." He nodded toward two men who blended back into the moving picture of the street so smoothly. I wondered how many times they'd done it for other women. Something in me bristled at the word mine. Something else, the part that has measured rooms for exits since age 12, recognized infrastructure when it saw it. I thought things were finally quieting down. Then everything changed fast. A uniform cut through the crowd. My charge nurse from St. Augustine, off duty but always judging. "Quinn," she said like it rhymed with problem. "You causing a scene?" Raphael didn't step closer. He didn't need to. He faded just enough that I could choose to handle my own business. I could feel the two worlds rubbing edges. The hospital that loves obedient hands. And whatever river network Raphael represented that runs on favors and warnings. A man collapsed. I said, "Calm, because calm is how you win." I stabilized and handed off to EMS. "You're welcome." She gave me that little smirk that says, "We both know how this goes when you file things." And the urge to pull out my notebook and write 3:14 p.m., Chartres Street, witness, brass band, almost made me laugh. "Try not to make yourself the story," she said, already walking. I watched her go and felt the old heat in my neck, the one that says you can be right and still lose if the room is stacked. "You keep notes?" Raphael said. "Not a question." "I keep receipts," I corrected. "And before you tell me you have people, keep this straight. I don't need saving. I need space. I'll keep the token until I don't. Then I'll mail it to whatever P.O. box you carved into that charm." He studied me for a second that felt like a long hallway. "Understood," he said. "No saviors, noted." He gestured toward a narrow side street only locals use when tourists clog Royal. "If you want to avoid the crush, Ursuline to the back of the cathedral is open." He said it like a weather report, neutral, but I could hear the map he carries in his head. Alleys, side doors, who owes whom. That was the first hook that pulled at me, a stranger who knew this city's arteries better than the people with radios. I tucked the notebooks back into my pocket, lifted my chin. "I'll find my own way," I said, because stubborn has kept me alive. But when I turned, I took the route he'd named without thinking, because pride doesn't have to be stupid to be real. The token tapped my wrist with each step, a small, steady knock like a heart at a door. I told myself it was just a charm. I told myself I'd drop it at the nearest mailbox once the adrenaline wore off. What I didn't expect was how much lighter the air felt with metal and leather on my skin. Like the city had given me a hall pass for the day. I kept walking, past a kid selling bottled water from a cooler, past a storefront blasting AC like salvation, past a priest laughing with a drag queen in a gold wig because New Orleans does not care what you think is supposed to match. Somewhere behind me the brass found its key again, and the quarter exhaled. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I already knew I'd just stepped into a story that wasn't done with me. St. Augustine always smells like bleach and chicory coffee, like someone's trying to scrub the city out of the place while the night shift keeps pouring it back in. I clocked in with powdered sugar still on my shoe from the quarter, told myself to shake it off, keep my head down, do my work. The brass token sat warm on my wrist under my sleeve, a weird comfort I refused to name. I filled out an incident slip about the groper because that's what you do if you want things to count later. Time, place, description, who was around, what was said. I brought it to charge. Ms. Harmon, who believes 3 things: paperwork saves lives, nurses should smile more, and I am a problem. She skimmed it, standing half in and half out of the med room, like the hallway might contaminate her, then sighed like I'd brought her a rumor. Crowd panic, Quinn. Parades bring touching. It's cultural. You know that. Be smart. She dropped the slip on a clipboard that already had 20 slips dying under it. You want a safety escort. Ask security. We don't put our hospital in the middle of someone's street drama. I swallowed the sting. It wasn't drama. It was a hand that didn't belong to me. She didn't look up. Chart what matters to patient care. Translation. If it doesn't affect our metrics, it didn't happen. I walked out before I said what I wanted to say. Break room microwave was doing that burnt fish thing. The flat screen was stuck on a Saints preseason recap because the remote died last year, and no one will requisition another one. And the zero harm poster curled up at the corners like it was embarrassed to still be here. The first ambulance hit the ramp before 9. Male, late 30s, altered, agitated, found behind a warehouse bar near the docks. Possible substance, the EMT said as we rolled him into Bay 4. He was big, that doc kind of big, shoulders like a pallet jack, sweat popping, legs kicking the rails, ripping at the oxygen. 2 things hit me at once. The sweet, sour chemical smell that always makes me think of cheap fentanyl cut wrong. And the way his chest was rising, fast, shallow. Then every 4th breath he'd pause like his body was forgetting the next step. What did you give? I asked. 2 of Ativan in the field. Tried Haldol, but he fought the line, EMT said. HR 80s now, but was in the 110s. Pupils? Pinpoint, then not. Could be a speedball, could be xylazine laced, could be Tuesday. We try to fix a lot of Tuesdays. Ms. Harmon materialized like a storm cloud. Sedate him before he hurts someone, she snapped, already flipping to the sedation orders we use when a patient is flailing and the whole room's about to go sideways. The resident, fresh out of school with a haircut that says he still believes in algorithms, nodded, hand hovering over the benzo drawer. The guy bucked again, eyes fogged, lips moving around words that didn't get out. Give me a second, I said, not loud, but in that tone we use when things are about to go very right or very wrong. I leaned in and watched his face, not the flailing. There's a look people get when they can't blow off CO2, agitation that isn't about fighting you. It's about fighting the inside of their own body. I counted his breaths out loud like I was keeping time for a band. 1, 2, 3, or every 4th or 5th, his belly would barely move. I pressed 2 fingers to the notch at his throat and felt the tug of air trying to get in through a straw. His skin wasn't sweaty, shiny from adrenaline. It was the weird gloss of hypoventilation. If you stack more benzo on this and it's opioid heavy, he's going to nap his way into a vent, I said. Steady. Harmon rolled her eyes. The resident's jaw twitched. I don't have letters after my name like he does, but I have too many nights under fluorescent lights. Let's titrate oxygen and bag assist if he dips. Hold additional sedation for 1 minute and trial small naloxone, I said, eyes on the monitor. 2 tenths. We're not trying to throw him into withdrawal. Just see if the chest wakes up. The resident hesitated, scared of being wrong in front of the dragon. You'll own it? He asked me, low. And my heart did that tired laugh because if it goes badly, it's always the nurse's fault anyway. I'll own what I do, I said. He nodded. Fine. 2 tenths. We pushed. The room held its breath with him. On the next cycle, the pause shortened, and his lungs remembered their job like a song came back on the radio. Not perfect, but better. We kept the mask snug, coached him through a couple breaths, the resident ready with plan B, and the fight came down a notch. "Talk to me, big guy," I said. "What's your name?" He blinked slow, mouth working. Dion. Dion, okay, you're in the ER, you're breathing, stay with me. It should have been another Tuesday, except Dion had a Tyvek wristband on the left, a cheap white strip like you get at a club, stamped with a green K and a crane logo. I've seen that stamp before in triage when brawls roll in after payday at the docks. "Where'd you pick him up?" I asked the EMT again. "Back lot at the Winch," he said. The Winch is a workers' bar 2 blocks off the river, the one with the sign that says no politics, no pools after midnight. Folks who work for keen stevedoring hang there because the foreman does. You go where your check goes. I slid a finger under the wristband and turned it so I could read the tiny print. Keen, ENT 12, Visitor Dock. My brain filed it next to the token on my wrist and didn't like the picture it made. I took a photo, not for Instagram, for my blue notebook. We got Dion stabilized, head of bed up, sats decent. And when the worst of the storm passed, he cried quiet tears that make more noise in your chest than any screaming. "I can't lose this job," he said, voice so small it made me want to fight someone. "They'll drug screen me if they know I was here." He hid his face like a kid. "I was clean 3 months. My cousin said the new stuff wasn't that strong." I believed him. Stupid. "I'm not here to judge your cousin," I said. "I'm here to get you breathing. You can talk to our social worker about options that don't get back to your boss if that's what you want." He nodded, not believing me. Everybody says they'll help until a supervisor calls. I asked him if I could cut the band to get a fresh IV in, and he said, panicked, Don't cut it. They check." I backed off. "Then we won't cut it," I said, and found a vein he hadn't bruised to hell yet. In the hall, Harmon cornered me like she'd been tracking my orbit. "Next time I say sedate, you sedate," she hissed. "If he had swung on you, it's your fault. If he stops breathing, it's your fault. Do you enjoy making liability?" She used the word enjoy, like I get a fix out of arguing for air. "He's breathing because we didn't stack sedatives on opioids," I said, still calm. "If we're going to talk liability, let's talk pattern recognition. Or we can talk about the docks." The second the word docks left my mouth, I knew I had said the wrong quiet part out loud. Harmon blinked too slowly. People only blink like that when they're calculating which furniture to throw first. "Do your job, Quinn," she said, and walked like she had somewhere important to be. I stood there with the taste in my mouth I get when a door shuts and you realize it's not about medicine anymore. It's about who gets invited to the meeting. I wanted to rip the token off my wrist on principle. I didn't. Mr. Clarence, who's cleaned this ER longer than I've been alive and remembers the names of every nurse who's ever cried in the supply closet, pushed his mop like a metronome near my feet. "You did right on the breathing," he said without looking up. "Saw that boy outside the Winch last week. Foreman had him loading while he was swaying. Folks pretend not to see if the crane keeps moving." He paused, then added like it was nothing. "Saw a white shirt with a green K handing out those bands behind the fence by Gate C. Not security, not union. Some cousin of the boss, maybe." He moved on before I could ask more. People like him survive by knowing when to stop talking. I took my lunch on the loading dock because the break room smelled like microwave sadness, and because you can see the river from there if you tilt your head between 2 stacks of oxygen tanks. The Mississippi was brown and mean and perfect, and I told myself to mind my business. I pulled out the blue notebook and did what I always do. Timestamp, location, chain of custody scribbles in case anyone accuses me of making it up later. I put the wristband photo next to the note about the groper and drew a line I didn't want to see. It looked like a map of a city I thought I knew. I kept thinking about Raphael saying witness like it was a job title. I don't like asking for help. I don't like owing anyone anything. I also don't like getting blindsided by a machine that's bigger than me because I pretended I could stare it. So I texted him. 1 sentence, 1 photo. "Do you recognize this logo?" Thumb hovered. I added, "I'm not joining anything. I just need to know where the current's running. The three dots danced like he was considering whether to be a gentleman or a general. Yes, keen stevedoring. INT-12 is their inner peer. Banned means someone wanted him inside without a paper trail. I'll send you a list of bar owners who feed that gate. My stomach did that drop you get on the big bridge into town. Don't, I wrote, then deleted, then wrote it again. Don't move on anything because of me. Noted, he replied. Then, a beat later, Nora, I'm not a savior, but I'm not blind either. If someone's funneling bad product through a door marked safe, it's going to kill more than one Tuesday. I stared at the screen until the phone went to sleep and the river kept going like it doesn't care whose names you write down. I slipped the blue notebook back into my pocket. Harmon could decide what counted for the hospital. I'd decide what counted for me. Before the end of shift, Dion breathed like a person again. He asked me if I had kids, which is what people ask when they're trying to remember. There's still a future that includes ordinary questions. No, I said, but I've got a niece who thinks she runs the state. He smiled, small, real. He tried to hide the wristband under the blanket like it was shame. I tucked it back into place because sometimes survival looks like living till payday. You're gonna get preached at by a social worker, I warned him. She's good. She's also loud. You don't have to give her what you're not ready to give, but listen for the one sentence that might help you keep your job and your heartbeat. He nodded. You always talk like that? He asked. Like what? Like you already know they're not going to do right by you, so you built a back door. I laughed. It came out more tired than funny. I grew up in houses where the front door locked from the outside, I said. You learn to find windows. At change of shift, Ms. Harmon told me I'd charted too many narrative lines in my note, and next time to keep to bullet points. I said, copy, because you pick your battles. In the locker room, I looked at the token one more time and told it, like a crazy person, that it wasn't a promise between us. It was a place marker. Then I tucked it under my sleeve and walked out into a New Orleans evening that smelled like rain and crawfish boil, and all the choices you get to make if nobody takes them from you. I thought I'd feel small after a day like that. I didn't. I felt steady. Not because a man with a network said he'd see me, but because I saw myself keeping the receipts. Even when the room wanted me quiet, I sent one more text. Thank you for the alley route. He wrote back. You found it yourself. I just told you it was open. And for the first time all week, I let myself believe both could be true. Raphael picked the place, public, bright, and loud enough to make eavesdropping a chore. Morning at Café du Monde means powdered sugar everywhere and tourists taking the same photo from a dozen angles, which suited me fine. He wore a clean white shirt rolled at the sleeves like he'd already worked a shift at some job nobody lists on LinkedIn. He didn't hug me, didn't reach for the token on my wrist, just nodded toward the river and said, Walk? I said yes because sitting makes hard talks harder. We cut along the moonwalk with the steamboat horn laying a low note under us. He kept a half step off my shoulder, not crowding. You texted me a band, he said. I owe you context. But if you want to stay here with beignets and noise, we can do it like that. I told him I'd go where I could see the exit and the water. He smiled like I'd passed a test he didn't like giving. His office was a second floor space over a bait and tackle shop that still sold paper maps. The stairs creaked like they knew his weight. Inside, it looked like a tugboat captain's brain. Charts, harbor diagrams, a whiteboard with numbers and arrows, and a wall of small screens showing slices of the river, a ferry dock, a warehouse gate, a rust, red crane that's always in the background of wedding photos for reasons I'll never understand. On one shelf sat a Saints helmet signed by a player my brother used to scream about when we still lived in the same zip code. On another, a jar full of those brass tokens, dull and warm and heavy with meaning I didn't ask for. Full name, I said before he got to his show, and tell. If he was bringing me into whatever this was, he could start by not being a ghost. Raphael Etienne Moreau, he said. Mama calls me Rafe when she's proud. Raphael when she's mad, and Etienne when she's both. And Maison Moreau? I asked, gesturing at the screens. A federally blessed, state-licensed river logistics company, he said dryly. Tugs, cranes, cold storage, temporary warehousing, union contracts, port fees, and more meetings than God intended. We move what this city needs moved and keep it moving when folks in suits forget the river doesn't do delays. He didn't blink. We also keep the lines around that movement honest, because when people start cutting corners, the water cuts back. It sounded like a mission statement written by a man who learned it the hard way. He tapped a keyboard, and one of the screens pulled up a recording. Last night, French Quarter, the angle from a balcony cam. The crowd a ribbon of color. He fast, forwarded with care, like he'd watched it enough times to know where it hurts. There I was, scrub pants, powder sugar on my shoe, blue notebook sticking out of my back pocket because I'm a cliché with receipts. There he was, the hand, the grin, the cheap entitlement you learn to spot even in a Mardi Gras mask. Raphael hit pause when the guy's face swung into the frame fully. No beads, no cover. Evan Keene, he said evenly. Third son of Seamus Keene, who holds contracts at Piers B through D. Evan thinks the city is his locker room. I felt the first pop in my chest, the one that says Fury is waking up. You know him, I said. Everyone who works Riverside knows him, Raphael said, and his jaw did a little grind like it wanted more to do. Keep watching. He split the screen, on the right. He brought up another clip, older, grainier, dated 2 years back, stamped with the name of a storage warehouse that turns into a party spot after midnight. I didn't know the date until the camera rolled and the music hit and my stomach left my body. That night, not the worst night, no hands got as far as they wanted, but the night I stopped breathing in crowds and started counting exits at a baby shower. The angle was high, near the emergency light. People danced. Security in black shirts leaned on a rail pretending to scan. The bouncer I'd told the police about, the one who met my eyes and then looked past me like I was a smudge on glass, was right there. 1080p apathy. Then, through the press, a profile I recognized, even though I wish I didn't. Evan. Laughing with a glass in his hand he didn't pay for. Touching lower backs like a turnstile. When a woman flinched, he made the same face I saw last night. A small victory in my brain said, I wasn't crazy. He was there. The bigger part of me wanted to crawl out of my skin. How did you even get this? I asked, voice not fully mine. I asked, he said, which wasn't nothing. I pay for cloud storage for half the small businesses along the river after they kept forgetting to back up footage. Makes me popular at crawfish boils and useful when the police say the camera malfunctioned. He let that land. I don't wave it in people's faces, but when it's about safety, I don't mind being obvious. He rewound to a frame where the bouncer looks away, while a hand that isn't mine takes a drink that isn't his. My heart did the old slow drum. Institutional rot, I said, and he nodded like we were using the same dictionary. I pulled my phone and opened the timekeeping app our hospital uses. Look, I said, actually shoving it in his face the way I hate people doing to me. Clocked out 23:28 for personal emergency. That was me calling my friend to come get me because my legs wouldn't work right. I wrote the report the next morning, filed it with campus police, logged the bouncer's name I got off his badge. They said the footage was unavailable. I tapped my blue notebook against my palm, a reflex that lives in my bones. I had this stuff. Raphael. I had it. It just didn't matter without the part you have. Eyes, he said. Ownership, I said. It came out harsher than I meant, and he took it like a man who expected a worse hit. I can get angry about that with you, he said, carefully. Or I can keep it useful. Useful, I said, because I've done Fury alone and it doesn't change paperwork. He clicked off the old clip and brought up a still. Gate C at the docks. Not last night, but a week ago. The angle caught a skinny guy in a white dress shirt handing out those keen wristbands through the chain link. Taking cash, smiling at the camera because he never thinks the camera is about him. The crane logo flashed green. This is how your Dion got inside a place he shouldn't have been able to get inside without his foreman knowing, he said. INT 12 on the band ties to an inner pier the public isn't supposed to be in. You can say possible xylazine-laced product, and I can say possible side door to move it. Different sides of the same cut. I thought about Mr. Clarence and his mop, how he'd said he saw a white shirt with a green K. I thought about my charge nurse telling me to keep my notes to bullet points. I thought about the bouncer's eyes on nothing while my body tried not to shake. I looked at Raphael and said, "Okay, you've got the river, I've got the rooms. We can draw the map together. But before we do, I need some things on paper, and I don't mean your letterhead." He waited. I appreciated that more than I should have. "Truth only," I said, tick, marking it with my pen like a contract. "If it's ugly, say it. If you think I won't like it, say it anyway. No tying pretty bows on bad information to keep me calm. I've been calm through worse." He nodded. "No touching without my say, so." He didn't blink. "Not a hand on my back. Not a hand at my elbow. You ask, or you don't." He looked down at my wrist where the token lay and said, "Yes." "Third," I said, and this one took a breath. "If you move on Keene because of what involves me, you also build a legal record. I'm not playing judge and jury in some back room. I'm not going to spend the next 10 years wondering who disappeared and whether I set that in motion. If you can't make that promise, then I'll take your files to the DA myself, and you can be mad later." His jaw clenched, then loosened. "I can promise to make the legal record," he said slowly. "I will not promise to do nothing while the legal record takes its sweet time, but I will coordinate. I won't blindside you. You will know before I move. Fourth?" "I sit in on things that touch me," I said. "If it's my name, my hospital, my patient, my street, you don't decide in a room I'm not in." "Deal," he said without making it a power thing. "You'll hate some rooms," he added. "That's fine," I said. "Rooms have hated me first." He reached for the jar of tokens and then stopped himself. "Permission to fix your cord?" he asked, because the leather had twisted under the edge of my sleeve. It was a tiny ask, stupid even, but I felt my throat loosen because he remembered. "Yes," I said, and held my wrist out. He turned the brass so the pelican sat upright and released my hand like it was hot. The screens hummed. The river camera showed a barge sliding slow, like a sermon no one was listening to. "I have one more thing," he said. "You don't have to like it, but I'm not letting you find it in a headline." He clicked another file open. A thumbnail from that same warehouse night. Different angle. Back alley by a door that said staff only. A woman I recognized by her visor, Miss Lila, the bartender who saw me sit down on a milk crate because my knees quit, was pushing a glass of water into my hands while a security guy tried to pull her away. She didn't move. "In the corner!" Evan's face flickered as he turned toward the hallway, then away when someone bigger than him stepped out of a shadow. I couldn't see that man's face. I could see his forearms. "She still works on the river," Raphael said, "at a bar that doesn't pretend anymore. She'll vouch for you if you want to make this official. She told me she tried to tell someone that night and nobody took her statement." Something in me that had been braced for years let go an inch. Somebody had believed me in real time. I just never got the memo. "Okay," I said, and my voice surprised me by being steady. "Here's how this goes. I'll prep my notes clean, with a chain of custody that would make a federal agent cry tears of joy. I'll talk to Miss Lila if she wants to be in this. You talk to whoever you talk to about the band guy at Gate C and the bouncer and Evan. We move together. If the DA punts, we decide the next right thing together. No cowboy stuff that puts my job or my people under a bus." He considered me like a person and not a variable. "Together," he said. "No cowboys. I prefer boats." "Funny," I said, but I wrote it down anyway. Rule number 1, truth. Rule number 2, consent. Rule number 3, legal record plus whatever he calls the river's way. Rule number 4, seat at the table. As I closed the notebook, a tug blasted 3 short salutes upriver. Raphael glanced at the screen and rattled off a pier change into a handheld like he was born with river maps behind his eyelids. I watched him work, the switch from soft to sharp and back again. And I thought, I could get used to someone who knows when to stay half a step off my shoulder. I also thought, if he crosses me, I'll tear this whole room apart with my pen. Both were true. When I left, he didn't follow me to the stairs. He just said, "Text me when you get home so I know you made it through the alley you chose." I almost cracked a joke about him being bossy. Instead, I said, "Text me if you decide to do anything I'll have to read about." "Noted," he said, using my word back at me like a promise. Outside, the heat hit and the river kept going. I walked toward the hospital with the token warm against my pulse, and the feeling that someone had finally turned the lights on in a room I've been told to navigate in the dark. The email from HR hit my inbox at 8:02 a.m. Subject line all caps, like a fire alarm. Mandatory meeting. Brand reputation and risk. I hadn't even poured hospital coffee yet, the kind that tastes like it gave up on itself halfway through the pot. I sat down in a conference room with a poster that said, "We believe survivors," right behind the head chair, and the HR director, Mr. Dillard, slid a packet across the table like a traffic ticket. "Nora, you've been observed interacting with known elements involved in organized crime." I almost laughed because known elements is the kind of phrase people use when they don't want to say someone's name out loud. "We have a duty to protect the hospital's image," he continued, folding his hands like he practiced empathy in a mirror. "Photos travel, stories distort. If you're working with anyone out there," he gestured vaguely toward the river like it was a cartoon map, "we need you to distance yourself. Immediately." I sipped coffee that tasted like warm pennies and asked, "Is this about patient safety or PR?" "Those aren't mutually exclusive," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll be putting you on an internal review. Paid, of course, while we assess. No posts about last weekend's events. No statements to press. And definitely no involvement in any proceedings that would make the hospital appear adversarial to local businesses." He slid an addendum for me to sign about social media and associations. I thought about the night 2 years ago, when I filed my report and watched it disappear into a drawer. I thought about how many posters like "We believe survivors" I've seen curling at the edges. "If I testify," I asked, "does the hospital appear adversarial to men who put hands where they don't belong?" He flinched at testify. "Why would you need to do that?" "Because I keep receipts," I said, and pushed the packet back. "And because I'm done pretending the river only floods when the weather says so." I texted Raphael from the stairwell because the elevator has opinions. "HR wants me quiet and far from you," he called. Not one of those drawn out typing bubbles that says a speech is coming. "I'll make this disappear," he said. Too fast. That sharp threat in his voice that means he switched into solve mode. "I'll have someone talk to your board chair. I'll make Keen's boy irrelevant. No, I said, and it came out steadier than I felt. Rule 3, legal record. If you move, we move with the DA, not against. I'm not going to be the reason some man vanishes and we all pretend the problem solved itself." Silence. Then the kind of breath a person takes when they're counting to 10. "The DA will not keep you safe," he said. Calm, but not. "Neither will HR." "HR's not supposed to," I said. "They're supposed to keep the hospital safe from the mess. I'm not a mess, I'm a witness." He didn't argue. He didn't agree. "Meet me at Canal and Decatur at noon," he said. "You're not going to like this next part." Assistant District Attorney Patrice LeBlanc works out of an office that smells like lemon cleaner and last night's gumbo. There's a shelf of framed trial photos and a saint's pennant that's faded like it got left in the sun too long. She wore a suit the color of a storm, and a face that said she's seen 100 brave starts that never made it to finish. Raphael kept to the wall, not touching me, not filling the room. "Ms. Quinn," she said, flipping a legal pad. "Mr. Moreau speaks highly of you. That makes me nervous and interested in equal measure." "I brought what I have," I said, and put the blue notebook on the table, along with printed stills Raphael sent, and what I could pull from my own timekeeping app. She scanned, pausing at the frame where the bouncer looks away and the hand reaches in from nowhere. "We can work with this if we can keep chain of custody clean," she said, tapping an old scar in the wood with her pen. I'll need affidavits, timestamps, hardware information for the camera sources, and I need to hear from your bartender witness. If she's willing, I want her under oath in a controlled setting as soon as possible. She's willing, Raphael said. Don't speak for her. Patrice shot back without looking at him. Then to me. Is she? She told me she tried to tell someone that night and no one took her statement, I said. She's tired of being told it's not a big deal. Okay. Patrice scribbled a list so tight you'd need a jeweler's loop to read it. We can do a victim's statement and affidavits this week. What I can't do is promise a swift arrest for the Golden Boy. The Keens break cases with delay. They're Olympic level at continuances. She glanced at Raphael and added, and if we get even a whiff of witness tampering or vigilante theater, I will not just tank your case, Ms. Quinn. I will charge whoever thought they were helping. She said it to me, but she aimed it like a dart at the man not leaning on the wall. Understood, Raphael said, and the word sounded like it cost him. When we walked out into the heat, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, friendly advice. Drop the council talk or your license becomes a casualty of the culture war. It was a city hall aide I knew from a clinic fundraiser last year. A guy named Marshall who can quote zoning code like scripture. Public safety committee isn't your arena. Nora. You'll make enemies you didn't know had names. I stared at the message and laughed. One dry sound that gave nothing away. I called him. Hey, Marshall, quick question. If I wanted a slot to speak at that committee, you just said doesn't exist for me. How do I get it? He sighed the way people do when they like you and also think you're walking into traffic. You file by noon tomorrow. You'll get 5 minutes. It'll be televised. Your hospital won't love it. Then they should love safer docs, I said. Text me the form. You're going to get flattened, he said, softer. People don't flatten easy if they've already learned to breathe with someone sitting on their chest, I said. I'll send you a Starbucks card when this is over. He groaned. God help me. I'm rooting for you. The rest of the day was receipts. I met Miss Lila at a bar with Christmas lights up year-round, because some places decide joy is a decision, not a season. She wore the visor, of course, and her hands shook when she signed the affidavit until she whispered, not because I'm scared, because I'm mad I let them convince me my eyes didn't see what they saw. We notarized it right there. Bartender, witness, blue, ink signatures that felt heavier than they looked. I called Dion to confirm he wanted his ER visit de-identified and was okay with me discussing anonymized patterns on record. If it keeps somebody else from the dumb I did, he said, use the Tuesday however you need. I thanked him and swallowed the lump that arrived without permission. Mr. Clarence didn't want his name on anything. He's got a pension to guard like it's the last dry patch of land. So he wrote one sentence on a sticky note and handed it to me as we crossed in the hall. Saw white shirt, green K passing bands at Gate C week prior. He winked and said, lose that accidentally in somebody's inbox, and kept pushing his mop. Raphael did his version of receipts, which looks like paperwork with teeth. He sent letters labeled Notice of Compliance Review to bars along the river that let certain people hand out certain bans. He requested a Port Authority audit of access logs for INT-12. He rerouted his own tugs to avoid Keene, controlled cranes, and put 2 of his union stewards on a safety walk that just so happened to end near Gate C at quitting time. He told me all of that in neutral sentences like a weather update. Then he slipped. If Evan disappears from the docks for a week, he said, almost casual, nobody will cry for him. I will, I said. I will, because my rules say I don't trade one kind of quiet for another. He looked like I'd slapped him, not because I'd hurt him, but because I'd hit a place he tries to keep armored. Nora, he said, and my name went from soft to steel. Men like him count on paperwork to outlast bruises. So we build paperwork that bruises, I said. On camera, under oath. With microphones hot and minutes taken. He didn't smile. He didn't argue. He put both hands on the table and nodded like he was making peace with a church he didn't trust, but would walk into anyway. I prepped. That's what I do when I'm scared. I build a thing that can stand when I shake. I printed venue maps of that warehouse, circled exits, marked where I was when the room tilted, and where security looked past me. I built a timeline for last weekend. Parade, groper, token, collapse, ambulance, wristband, gate C. I redacted Dion's identifiers and wrote a simple human paragraph about hypoventilation and why certain sedatives stack like bad debt. I included a line about how you can keep a man alive without humiliating him. I laid chain of custody details like stones across a creek, camera sources, cloud storage IDs, who had access when, notarized statements, my own time card. I tucked the blue notebook into a clear folder because people take you more seriously when the mess looks neat. That night, my sister called from Baton Rouge, voice bright at first because she always starts with the good. Maya got Student of the Month, she said. She wants to be a vet and a DJ. Then the pause, the one where she asks what I'm doing and if she needs to worry. I told her the truth in simple terms. I'm going to speak in a room where people usually prefer I don't. Do you need me there? She asked. The way she asked made my throat close up. No, I said. Then, maybe. We'll drive down, she said. Maya's never seen City Hall. She can learn how grown-ups act when they're scared. I laughed because that's my sister. Teach the kid to look the scary in the eye and take notes. At midnight, HR sent another reminder email with weirdly cheerful bullet points about media protocols. I sat on my couch, token warm against my wrist, laptop light carving the dark, and I thought about cages. People think cages have to be iron. Sometimes there are polite emails in nice conference rooms and phrases like known elements. Sometimes there are a river network that says, "Let me handle it." And you never have to know what happens after the door closes. I'm not naive. I'm also not a martyr. I want to live, keep my license, keep my job, keep my niece thinking I can lift cars. But I'm done being invisible. If there's going to be a cage, I'm going to pick the lock and keep the keys. I texted Raphael, Public Safety Committee tomorrow at 2. ADA wants affidavits by noon. I'll send the packet at 10. He wrote back, I'll have 2 compliance stewards at City Hall, not to escort, to witness. I stared at that word and felt something inside me land. Witness is fine, I wrote. Savior's still off the table. Copy, he sent. Then, Nora, proud of you isn't strong enough. I put the phone face down like it was too bright and whispered into the room that smelled like laundry and lemon cleaner. Okay then, let's make the record. The night before the hearing felt like the city holding its breath. I was at Raphael's long kitchen table under a ceiling fan older than both of us, assembling the packet that would either crack something open or make me radioactive at work. Affidavits, camera metadata, a map with circles that looked like a kid had taken a red crayon to the docks. Lucia kept setting food near my elbow like worry could be out. Cooked gumbo, cornbread, a slice of Doberg cake wrapped in wax paper with my name in looping cursive. Outside, the bayou hummed with frogs and the low whine of insects that don't care about human plans. I told myself to sleep after I sent Patrice a clean PDF at 10. I told myself I'd rest my hands, shut my eyes, wake up with a voice that didn't shake. At 10:41, the estate alarms didn't sound so much as shrug. Lights flickered, then held. My phone lit up with a single word from the private security app Raphael made me install and never opened. Breach. Then a second line nobody wants to see. East Service Tunnel. Alarm bypassed. You know that feeling when your stomach goes into the elevator before you do? That. The house moved in a way houses shouldn't. Too many footsteps in the wrong direction. A guard sprinted past the archway, calm on his face and gun low, saying, "Stay interior, ma'am," in a voice that belongs to men who don't expect ma'am to be argued with. "Rafe," I called, already on my feet, knocking the token with my knuckles like it could wake up luck. He answered in 2 strides and a look that was all signal. Zero comfort, vest in one hand, radio in the other, sleeves pushed up so I could see the river, map veins at his wrists. "Into the safe room," he said. Not loud, but in that tone people obey by reflex. I should have gone. I know that. Sensible people pick the fortified box and call it maturity. But panic only wins with me if I don't give it a job. Not until you open your channel. I said, already sliding the vest on, fingers stupid on the straps until he yanked them tight. Live transparency, Raphael. Every move, no shut doors. I need to hear you breathe while you go play general. He stared, jaw working through 3 arguments and a prayer. Then he put a comms earpiece in my hand, clipped his own, and pressed his radio. Primary net open, Quinn is on, she hears everything, he said, which got him a chorus of copy. One familiar, one annoyed, and one old. School, yes, sir, that told me his men would let me in even if they didn't love it. You learn a building by its air. Hospitals taught me that. Where it smells like bleach because someone coded, and where it smells like pennies because blood doesn't ask permission. The Moreau place usually smells like lemon oil and coffee, and the kind of old wood that keeps secrets. That night, the East Wing smelled like hot metal and ozone. I grabbed the trauma tote from under the kitchen island. Raphael keeps it stocked like a man who expects bad nights, and headed for the interior hall while the radio clipped through positions. North wall sealed. South cameras live. Thermal blips at the culvert. Someone swore in French about a gate that shouldn't have moved. Another voice, Benoit. I'd learned his name by osmosis, said, Gate C internal shows manual override signature. What the hell? Add admin token Marie ah. He said it like he didn't want the word in his mouth. Repeat, Raphael ordered, calm, like he'd painted it on. Override signed Marin S at 2239 East Service Tunnel. 2-factor accepted, Benoit said, voice going flat the way good men sound when the math turns ugly. Marin Soto is an accountant, the soft, spoken kind who knows everybody's birthdays and which family needs their Christmas bonus early. I saw his polite smile flash in my head, the one he uses when he leaves meetings as if he hasn't just decided the fate of a payroll. Inside, I said out loud, to myself, to the earpiece, to the way the air was moving wrong. Then something popped like a light bulb dying, and the east wing went dark 2 beats before the generator groaned to life and made the sconces hum. That hum told me the HVAC had just switched to emergency mode. I looked up, breathed through my mouth, and heard it. The fan cycle didn't match the lights. On a normal night, East wing vents run steady because the wine room and the server closet are fussy about temperature. Tonight, there was a hiccup every 30 seconds, like someone upstream had toggled a purge. The maintenance app Raphael's chief had shown me once on a drill sat on a tablet by the pantry, because this house is prepared for anything except people. I pulled it up, thumbed past the pretty dashboard, and found the schedule. Somebody had reprogrammed the east corridors to economy at 2235, then purge test at 2238. Both were tagged with a vendor account from a company I recognized because their truck had been on the driveway last week, with a magnet that said Pelican Mechanical, and a pelican that looked like it wanted to fight. The service ticket on the tablet said, Next visit Friday. This was Wednesday. I felt the stupid calm that shows up when you accept you're already late and move anyway. Raphael, I said into the mic, your HVAC got lied to. East Wing is purging on a vendor code. Gate C override hit 2 minutes after that. If I were a rat, that's where I'd run in. The shot didn't even sound like movies. It sounded dull and mean and close. The silver-haired guard, Ray, the one who calls me ma'am like he's allergic to my first name, stumbled into view holding his left arm awkward, eyes wide in that angry way men get when their body disobeys. Blood bloomed through his sleeve and ran toward his cuff, in a line that made my training kick before fear could. Sit, I said without hello, tugging him behind the marble island that has probably seen nicer parties. Bullet went through, he grunted, then tried to stand. Nope, I said, pressing my palm above the wound, the other hand fishing for the compression bandage in the tote. You want to be a hero? You'll do it with 2 liters in you, not on my floor. He laughed, short and surprised, and stayed down. I checked for exit, found it higher on the triceps, thanked whoever designs houses with good lighting, and cursed whoever picks cream tile for a life like this. Pain scale? I asked, and he said Wednesday, which I decided was an 8. Breathe with me, I said, because it costs nothing and works more than people think. On the comm, someone yelled, "Contact East, stairwell," and someone else said, "Two down," and my mouth tasted like pennies. I built a tiny ER at the island, tourniquet high and loose in case we needed it, pressure on the wound with my knee when I had to grab tape, occlusive over the exit, gauze like a born again, lines drawn mentally because I wasn't going to burn actual IV access if we were about to move. "Ray, tell me something you like for breakfast," I said, to keep the thinking part of his brain online. "Grits with too much butter," he said. "Lucia gonna fuss." "She's gonna give you 2 bowls and tell you it's doctor's orders," I said. And he breathed in, out, in, out. Following the count, I tapped on the tile. "Nora," Raphael said in my ear, and in the room at the same time because he'd moved without me seeing him, which I hated and loved. He took in the scene in a blink, my hands on his man, the tote open like a tackle box, the way my shoulders were not shaking yet, and knelt on the clean side so he could look Ray in the eye. "You stay with Quinn, you hear?" he said, half fierce, half soft. Ray rolled his eyes like men do when affection embarrasses them. "Boss, they found the hole," Benoit said through the radio. "East maintenance hatch, weld looks new." "On me," Raphael said, already up. "Nora, safe room. Now." "Open net or I don't move," I said, not lifting my hands. He swore in a way that made me want to smile later, and handed me a second earbud from his pocket, clipping it to my vest so it wouldn't fall out. "Channel 2 is the internal, door sensors, HVAC, tunnel cams. You want the God's eye view, you've got it. If you hear me say blackout, it means you stop listening and you go underground. And we argue about it tomorrow." He bent his head so we were eye to eye. "Please." That last word had more metal in it than all his orders. "Deal," I said, because you can give ground without losing yourself. He squeezed my shoulder, ask, wait, receive, and went. Channel 2 was louder than I expected. It wasn't just doors and vents. It was heartbeat, but for a house. I could hear the east wing chuff and the safe room intake sigh alive. I could hear door sensors chime green, red, green. I could hear Benoit mutter to a woman named Piper about a credential that shouldn't have worked but did. "Marin's fob was used internally," Piper said, voice clipped the way IT people get when the system has betrayed them. "If his phone's in his desk like it always is, somebody cloned his token, or he did us himself." "He left at 6, Lucia said calmly on Channel 1 from somewhere that made the room sound warm. "He kissed my cheek and told me to get sleep. Men who do bad things kiss cheeks, too." It landed like a psalm, and then the world jumped a track again. The house took a breath inward. You wouldn't notice if you weren't listening for it. The intake shifted where it shouldn't, trying to feed the east corridor that thought it should be purging. If someone threw smoke or gas down the service tunnel, the system would try to redistribute like a polite host handing out fans. "Piper," I said, forgetting who pays whose salary. "Lock east vents to recirc and close dampers to the main hall. Don't let the system share air like a potluck." She didn't ask who I was. She said, "Copy." And the tablet in my lap flicked from orange to green as vents snapped where I wanted them. "Benoit, swing manpower off the east hallway and catch them as they try service stair B. They won't like breathing their own mess," I added, then caught myself. "Sorry, not my net." "It is tonight," Benoit said. No smile in it. All respect. Somebody yelled, "Flash!" and the tablet camera for stair B flared white, then cleared to show 2 men in cheap body armor blinking dumb under the ricochet of their own distraction devices. Moreau men moved like they'd practiced the path in their sleep, which they had. I moved Ray when his color came back from paper to something human. We got him into a back pantry with a rolling steel door that could stop a truck. I left him with a pressure bandage and a promise. "If it leaks, call," I said, tapping my ear. "If you pass out, I will be mad." He grinned like I'd said something nice. A housekeeper named Yvette, who can turn chaos into clean faster than a miracle, showed up with a bucket like she meant to scold the floor into submission, and I drafted her without apology. "You're my runner. Gauze, tape, water. If anyone not wearing our faces tries this door, you throw bleach in their eyes and run." She nodded like I'd told her the day's special. Baby, I got hand, she said and set her jaw. And for 20 minutes, the world was radio and breath, and the specific kind of time that stretches like old gum. Raphael's voice cut through it. Positions, trades, a soft good when a camera cleared, a quieter I see you when a man said he was bleeding and still vertical. He didn't narrate heroics, he showed his work. Left flank, hold fire. They're backing into Piper's dead air. Benoit, door 3 is going to look green in 5. Do not trust it. Quinn, report. He called me into his math without patronizing me. And I answered because that's what you do when someone lets you be useful in the middle of the worst kind of night. Ray stable, I said. Pantry secure. East vents isolated. Your house is breathing again. They found the inside a hatch welded bad and painted good. A betrayal in the shape of fresh metal. This is new work, Raphael said. And the way he said new made my face heat. Whose contract touched this last? Pelican Mechanical, Piper answered, and I pictured that pelican on the truck that wanted to fight. Approved by Marin Soto. No one said his name for a long breath. Then Lucia, through the open channel they'd given me because I asked for it, said, "We will not bleed quietly for math on a balance sheet." It wasn't anger the way men do anger. It was a verdict read by a woman who's buried too many good ones. The radio didn't mourn. The radio moved. Secure Marine's office, Raphael said. No one touches a key, a drive, or a pencil. Piper, pull every login he made this week and mirror it to a clean box you name and no one else does. On it, she said, fingers clacking like rain. When the last man ran the wrong way into a room, his buddy had already learned not to enter. The house sound changed again. It went back to being a house, fridge hum, ice dropping, the far-off pop of someone stepping out the front door to throw up adrenaline into the bushes. My hands finally shook, late and polite. I wiped blood off the tile with a towel I'd apologize to later. Raphael walked back in, looking like a man who'd been someone else for an hour and didn't know how to take that off yet. He set his gun on the counter without drama and touched my shoulder the way you touch a railing on an old stair. Grateful it's where it's supposed to be. You good? He asked. And the question hit bone. Define good, I said, which made him laugh in the broken place where you store your chuckles for nights like these. He lowered his forehead to mine for 1 second, then remembered and asked, "Permission?" "You're fine," I said, because I had more rules than romance in me, and he was smart enough to check even now. "I wanted you underground," he said, straightening, back in the room, and not on the net. "You asked to hear it, and I gave you the whole thing, and I hate that you heard it." "I'd rather hear truth than assume lies," I said, voice small and big at the same time. "Besides, you were less reckless because I was listening." He gave me a look that said he knew I was right and wished I weren't. "Marin," I said, and the name made my throat dry. "We'll handle it," he answered. Too quick, then corrected himself because of Rule 1. "We'll handle it 2 ways, paper and river, no back doors you don't see." He picked up his radio again, not to bark, but to say, on an open channel where every man could hear. "For the record, Quinn kept 3 of you prettier than you were going to be. She's in the book. You see her, you listen." The chorus that came back wasn't applause. It was yes. In this house, that matters more. We mopped up, literally and not. Yvette fussed at the floor until it apologized. Ray ate a pudding cup with his non-injured hand and complained about raisins like that could make the blood back itself up. Piper showed me a screen where Marin's logins lit up like a bad Christmas. Each override a little red pin in a map of trust. I watched the pins and didn't cry. Panic had come and done its worst, and what was left was control you could build on. When I finally sat down at the long kitchen table again, my packet still open to the page where I'd written chain of custody in block letters, I added a new line in smaller print. House breathes if you help it. It was dumb and true, and mine. Raphael poured water into a glass and set it near my hand like a peace offering. "You're going to go in front of microphones tomorrow," he said, "with hands that did this tonight." He looked like he wanted to ask me not to. He looked like he was proud enough to swallow the ask. "Yeah," I said. I'm going to talk about Tuesday and vents and bans and how you don't fix a flood by moving the furniture. I'm going to ask for a record that hurts the right people." He nodded, slow, resigned, and relieved all at once. "Then I'll sit behind you and listen to every word," he said, not as a savior. "As a witness," I finished. The token on my wrist clicked against the glass, one small sound in a house that was finally quiet. Outside, the frogs kept singing like they had all along, and for the first time since the alarm shrugged and the world tipped, I felt my breath go all the way in and all the way out. Panic had gotten its say. Control took the mic. City Hall always smells like old paper and new anxiety. By 2 o'clock, the Public Safety Committee room was packed shoulder to shoulder. Dock stewards in orange vests. A couple bar owners who swear they've never seen a wristband in their lives. Moms with toddlers because childcare is a myth. And 3 local reporters pretending they're just here to observe, not to pounce. My sister sat 2 rows back with Maya, who'd made a sign on printer paper that said, "We listen in purple marker with a crooked pelican." Lucia was there too, pearls and posture, a calm front porch in a storm. Raphael took the seat behind me and left an empty chair between us like a promise. Witness, not savior. The brass token tapped my wrist as I filled out the speaker card. I wrote my name, my title, and 3 words where it asked for topic: chain of custody. They did the flags and the roll call and the civility speech that tells you it won't be civil. First up was the hospital PR guy in a suit the color of polished apples, using the voice people use when they want you to know they're reasonable. "St. Augustine is committed to patient safety and community partnership," he said, eyes never landing on me. "We deplore illegal drug activity anywhere near our city's waterfront and are eager to support law enforcement." He smiled like a brochure. Then Ms. Harmon took the mic even though nobody called her name. And that told me everything. "Our staff adhere to strict sedation protocols," she started, and I knew where she was going because she'd told me in a hallway yesterday. "It is dangerous when individual employees decide to deviate from physician-directed care based on hunches." The word hunch hit like spit. She didn't say my name. She looked over my head at the cameras and went on. "We cannot allow personal vendettas or social media narratives to dictate clinical practice." The room shifted. People who didn't know me heard reckless. My sister squeezed Maya's shoulder until the kid made a face. I kept breathing. Calm is a plan, not an accident. Patrice, the ADA, stood like a woman who paid for her own suits. "Committee, before public comment, the district attorney's office would like to enter 3 exhibits." She didn't look at Harmon. She didn't look at PR Apple. She looked at the chair and said, "Exhibit A, time, stamp footage from the Bourbon and Bay warehouse on June 18th, 2 years ago, showing security looking away while a patron is harassed. Exhibit B, balcony footage from last weekend's second line, identifying Evan Keene, son of Seamus Keene, touching a woman without consent. Exhibit C, stills from Gate C at the docks a week prior, showing Keene, affiliated personnel distributing unauthorized access bans labeled INT12. She clicked a remote, and the wall behind her became the part of my life I hadn't been able to show anyone, without sounding like I was asking for sympathy. The warehouse night flickered up grainy and awful. The bouncer's eyes sliding off a woman like she was furniture. Then the parade. My cheap scrub pants and powdered sugar. His grin. Then the chain link and the skinny white shirt passing bands like coupons. People made the sound crowds make when the story they told themselves turns out lazier than the truth. Soft angry, surprised at themselves. Patrice let the quiet sit just long enough to be a lesson. "Ms. Quinn," she said, "you're up." I walked to the table and my legs didn't do the old trick. I stated my name and spelled it because they always ask you to, and pulled the blue notebook out like a friend. "I'm a trauma nurse at St. Augustine. I'm trained to keep people breathing and to document what happened in case the room forgets. I logged an assault 2 years ago with campus police and was told the footage was unavailable. I logged Saturday's incident with my charge nurse and was told it was crowd panic. I logged a patient Monday with respiratory depression who came in wearing an INT-12 band from keen stevedoring's inner peer and was told to stick to bullets, not narratives. I slid a copy packet across to the clerk, timestamps, maps, chain of custody for the files Patrice had. A one-page explainer about why stacking sedatives on opioids is how you get a vent you didn't need and a funeral you didn't plan. I'm not here to play doctor. I'm here to say there's a pattern, side doors to the pier, the cameras that work for everyone but women, and a young man whose lungs forgot their job because somebody cut product, and a foreman wanted the crane to keep moving. I didn't name Dion. I didn't need to. I described the wristband and the panic in his eyes and how relief looks when it's allowed. I'm asking you to put on record that this is happening. Subpoena access logs for INT-12. Require the port to audit vendor credentials. Tell hospital administrators they don't get to call survivor reports street drama and shove them in a drawer. I glanced at Harmony and didn't let my face do what it wanted. If you need testimony under oath, I'm already here. Questions, Tia. A councilman who'd built his career on ribbon cuttings asked if I was anti-industry. And I said, I'm pro-breathing. A woman with teacher energy asked if my hospital supported my testimony, which was generous of her. And I said, they support a version of me who doesn't make them uncomfortable. Laughter that wasn't kind rolled. The chair tapped her pen for quiet. Harmon tried to jump back in with point of clarification, because people like her get high on clarifying other people. But Patrice was ready and slid a paper across the table. Chain of custody affidavit, she said, signed and notarized by Ms. Quinn and by the bartender who attempted to report the incident 2 years ago. Miss Lila stood up without being asked, visor and all, and raised a hand like she was in church. I saw what I saw, she said, voice steady. And I got tired of being told the camera was broken every time it was a girl from the wrong side of canal. The room hummed. An older man in a longshoreman's cap said, loud enough to carry. Somebody behind me whispered, about time, while Patrice wrapped the evidence and the chair thanked us for bravery, with that tone people use when they're more relieved than grateful. Harmon pulled her last card. Ms. Quinn, is it true you deviated from physician orders and recommended naloxone for a patient already sedated? She thought she had me in the corner labeled reckless nurse, and the camera lights leaned closer like gulls. I didn't look at the counsel. I looked straight at Harmon because some lessons needed direct address. It's true I recommended 2/10 naloxone after assessing a breathing pattern consistent with opioid involvement and asked to delay further benzodiazepines for 60 seconds to avoid respiratory arrest. The resident agreed. The patient improved. He's alive. I let the room feel the word alive. What you call a deviation is called clinical judgment. It's how nurses keep people's mothers from dying while paperwork scrolls. Harmon went still. Not silent, still, like she'd run out of space to hide her disdain. The PR guy scribbled something that looked like a draft apology to use if the wind changed. The chair said, noted, in a way that meant, sit down. We were leaving when the first alert hit every phone at once. Push notification from a station that loves a breaking banner. A whisper rolled through the hall like weather. Evan Keane had bolted during a voluntary interview and been detained by U.S. Marshals at the Algiers ferry terminal after trying to board without ID. Somebody in back whooped and got shushed. Patrice didn't smile. She just exhaled like a person putting down a weight she hadn't admitted she was carrying. This doesn't mean we win, she said on the fly to a camera because she's good at her job. It means the process is working today. She cut her eyes at me and added, and we move faster when people keep receipts. Outside, the steps look like church after a big sermon. People in clusters, talking too loud, hugging because they weren't sure what else to do with their hands. A union steward I'd never met walked up, tipped his cap at me like the old movies, and said, "That was clean work, ma'am." Then he handed me something small wrapped in a cafe napkin. It was a rusted gate token from who knows what year, stamped with a tiny K someone had X'd out with a pocket knife. Found it under Gate C when we were patching after the last hurricane, he said. Been keeping it as a reminder not to forget who we work for. He nodded toward the workers in vests. It's not them. I slid the token next to the pelican on my wrist and felt ridiculous and whole. Back at the hospital, PR Apple had already converted in the face of public opinion like a fair weather friend. An email hit everyone's inbox saying St. Augustine's supports staff who participate in civic processes to advance safety. No mention of the meeting where my mouth earned me a review. Mr. Dillard added me to paid administrative review anyway, which is HR for go sit in the corner while we figure out how to look decent on TV. I forwarded the email to Patrice with the subject line, "For your records." She wrote back one word, "Useful." Raphael didn't crowd me. He stood under an oak where the sidewalk buckles and let me come to him. He looked like he wanted to pick me up and drop me over the safety line of his world and lock the gate. Instead, he said, "You were," and stopped like the word he wanted didn't exist in English. I leaned into the tree because my knees had decided they could finally shake. Felt good to be heard without raising my voice, I said. First time in a while? He nodded. Like heard is a word he's had to buy for other people and never got to keep for himself. We walked without talking for a block, weaving around tourists and a brass band auditioning on the steps because someone always is. He cleared his throat and said it in the tone he saves for my rules, which is respect with a stubborn streak. "Nora, marry me." He didn't crouch. He didn't show a ring. He didn't make it a spectacle. He said it like a plan. "I will build around you. I will claim you loud. I will make this house yours on paper and in practice so no HR man and no Keen's son gets to pretend you're alone." Part of me wanted to say yes just to watch Harmon choke on it. Part of me wanted to run, because marriage doesn't save anyone if the rules underneath are rotten. I took a breath and told the truth I'd promised him I'd tell. "Ask me after we build rules that can survive peace," I said. "It's easy to be honorable with your adrenaline up and enemies at the gate. I want to see what we are when it's boring, when nobody's filming." When I say no just because I'm tired and you don't take it as a challenge, he flinched like it hurt in the right place. Then he nodded, a single clean agreement, and took a step back as if to make room for the space I just claimed. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. Evan was in custody, scheduled for arraignment, lawyers already warming up. The Keen statement said something bland about confidence in the system and sons who have made mistakes. Patrice texted me a time for formal testimony and a list of questions so long it looked like a CVS receipt. HR sent a calendar invite for my supportive review conversation. Lucia called to ask if Maya could have beignets for dinner and whether I wanted coffee or something stronger. I told her coffee, because the adrenaline was crashing and I still had to get home. "You were brave without making a mess," she said. "That's rarer than diamonds." That night, in my little apartment that still smells like old paint and rosemary because the last tenant was a cook who loved one herb too much, I put the 2 tokens on the counter and stared at them like they were a math problem. One was the pelican that meant someone on the river would see me. One was the old gate token with the K scratched out. It felt like a before and after I hadn't permitted but had earned anyway. I thought about being a girl in a house where the front door locked from the outside. I thought about being a woman in a room where the door is open and people still tell you to stay put. I held both coins and said out loud, "To the paint and the quiet and my tired bones. We're not doing cages if we build anything. It's doors I can open." My phone pinged. "Raphael. No cowboy moves tonight. Just a porch and crickets. Proud of you. Again. Patrice. Bring your notebook tomorrow. We're going to make some folks uncomfortable. Ms. Harmon, please schedule time with HR. Attendance mandatory." And from my sister, a photo of Maya asleep with the purple sign on her chest and powdered sugar on her cheek. I laughed for the first time all day without the edge of it cutting. Satisfaction is a clean line on a messy page. Clarity is deciding not to stop at that line. Tomorrow I would testify under oath, in a room that likes its women tidy. Tonight I drank coffee on the floor and let my hands shake. Not from fear, but from relief that the record finally had my handwriting on it. The week after the hearing felt like somebody finally opened a window. Not a clean breeze. New Orleans doesn't do clean, but air that moved. Keen routes started wobbling the way bad habits do when the light stays on. You could see it in little things. A crane that suddenly had to wait for a real inspection. A foreman who stopped smirking at the safety meeting. A bar owner who took down the no politics sign and taped up a no wristbands notice like it had always been policy. Patrice called to say the case had teeth, not just headlines. HR called to say my supportive review would be paused while the hospital evaluated new information. That's bureaucrat, for we don't want to be on the wrong side of the next round. I took the win without letting it rewrite history. I still carried the blue notebook. I still counted exits. But I let myself exhale long enough to consider what a world would look like if we wrote some rules for once and didn't wait to be told where to stand. Raphael asked me to come to a meeting that wouldn't have made me welcome a month ago, the Maison Moreau Captain's Table. It was at an old Union Hall that smells like wood polish and boiled peanuts, not a lair with leather chairs. Men with sunburned necks and women who run dispatch stood around coffee in styrofoam cups while a projector hummed. I sat at the end, not at the head, because I promised myself I wouldn't mistake proximity for power. Lucia opened the meeting like a matriarch, and a CFO rolled into one. "We are not here to celebrate that a rival trips," she said in that voice that makes men twice her size shut up. "We are here to decide what our house does when we absorb someone else's mess." No one said the word empire. They said roots, cranes, payroll, vendor audits. Then Raphael handed me the clicker like it was a baton I could drop or run with. I clicked, palms sweating like a high school debate kid, and the slide had a simple header: the River Code, no trafficking. No forced labor, no pay skimming, random payroll audits every quarter with a third-party firm, not someone's cousin. Whistleblower line routed through a clinic, not through anyone with a boat. A fund seated by court, ordered forfeitures from a Keen shell company. Patrice had a form for it. Only in America do you need a form to be moral, to pay relocation, lock changes, and a bus ticket at 2 a.m. when someone needs out and needs it now. A compliance team with real teeth, Piper from IT, a labor lawyer Lucia trusts, a dock steward who can smell lies across water, and me as the one who asks the annoying questions no one wants to hear at the end of long days. "You're turning a syndicate into a safety net," one captain said. Not rude, just wary. "I'm turning a rumor into a policy," I said. "Don't make me lie to my niece when she asks what we do." I built some of it from the hospital world. How narcotic counts get audited without humiliating people. How anonymous reporting lives or dies based on who picks up the phone. Some of it came from cheap motels and bus stations I've waited in when life's long legs got too long. We named the whistleblower thing Riverline. Not cute, just clear. And I insisted on one stupid, symbolic rule. The number goes on every payroll check stub. You want workers to remember a thing? You staple it to their money. A captain with a face like oak balked. "We'll look soft," he said, "the way men do when they mean we'll look like we care, and someone might use it against us." Lucia smiled without kindness. "Strong men don't care who sees them help," she said. And I watched him learn something he'll pretend he knew all along. We didn't cheer when the policy passed. We wrote it down, signed it, and assigned names next to deadlines. A guy in the back, union steward with grease in his fingerprints, raised a hand. "If I give my nephew that number and I'm wrong about them listening, I'm done with y'all," he said. "Fair," I said. "Hold us to it." That afternoon, I went back to St. Augustine, not as a martyr, but as an employee who knows her job and her worth. Mr. Dillard from HR tried to reintegrate me like I'd been through a hurricane. "We want you to feel supported," he said, handing me a pamphlet with a photo of a plant in a ray of sun. I told him support would look like a security rota that didn't turn the ER into a standoff. 2 retired EMTs, not a guy with a chest, thumping complex. Rotating posts visible but not menacing. Escorts on request. Escorts trained to ask permission before they touch an elbow. A private doorway for high. Risk discharges after midnight so patients don't walk into their worst fear. D. Escalation refreshers that include the part where you check if someone's breathing before you give them the chemical nap. Harmon sat in the corner during the meeting and stabbed a pen into her legal pad like it had wronged her. I didn't look at her. This wasn't about settling scores. This was about writing a playbook that didn't require me to be the only adult in a room full of credentials. We reached an MOU with 3 boring signatures that will outlive anyone's good mood. On the way out, Mr. Clarence passed me in the hall, pointed at the sign over the exit that says "Zero Harm," and said, "Today, it don't lie." I laughed harder than the joke deserved because some days, small things feel like mountains you get to sit on. By the end of the week, Raphael had drafted his own version of seating power that made my stomach flip in the best way and the scariest. He wrote a memo to his captains that didn't sound like a memo. It sounded like someone setting down a weapon. No operation that touches St. Augustine or any clinic shall proceed without Nora Quinn's say so. Period. It was in plain language, not a lawyer's forked tongue. He sent it through official channels, not whispered orders. And then, this mattered, he stood up in front of his people and said it out loud. If she says no, he told men who've never been told no by a woman in their line of work, it means no. Not work around it, not call me in an hour, no. They looked at me like I was a new tool nobody's sure how to use. I looked back like I didn't need to be a tool to be useful. That night, sitting on his porch while cicadas screamed their love songs, he admitted it cost him something. "I'm used to being the lever," he said, rough with the truth. "I'm not used to handing it off." I squeezed his hand and said, "I'm not used to being trusted in rooms I didn't mop first." We sat like that until the heat broke. Lucia, being Lucia, found a way to make a symbol feel like a plan. She handed me a box not long after, small and heavy, the kind jewelers use when they want you to think more of them. Inside was a dull gold band, not finished, edges soft like a coin that's been loved too hard. "The pelican token met a torch," she said, almost mischievous. "Algiers Point, blacksmith named Ida, who forges hurricane hinges when the seasons turn ugly. We gave her the brass and asked her for a blank. 'Not my design,' she told me. 'Her hand has to shape it or else it's just another man's promise.' I held the ring and saw the token in it, not as a collar, but as a circle I could close or not. 'I'm not saying yes today,' I told Lucia, who already knows everything. 'I'm saying I'll design my own yes.' She kissed my cheek the way mothers do when they approve and keep a record of it for later. We started boring work because boring work is where change hides. Piper installed an audit system that would make a casino blush. Every login throws a flag if it smells like someone else's hands. Benoit and the stewards walk docks with clipboards and actual checklists, not just vibes. And you'd be surprised how fast "we've always done it this way" changes when a man with a W-2 and a voice shows up with a form. We printed Riverline cards in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, because a port is a Babel, and care doesn't care whose alphabet you pray in. We stuck them in bathroom stalls and glove boxes, and in a little tin on the bar at Lila's like mints. The first call came from a welder with fingers so burned he couldn't straighten them. He told us about a cousin getting told to work it off after a foreclosure left him soft targets for favors. We paid for a U-Haul and a lock change and a motel that didn't smell like despair. I don't have a savior complex, I have a memory. I remember the houses where the front door locked from the outside. Every time we cut a lock women didn't ask for. My chest loosened a notch. Not everything turned to honey. Marin, the accountant, didn't come back after the breach. We froze his accounts and mirrored his drives. The map that lit up made me dizzy and vindicated. Lucia stared at a spreadsheet like it had insulted her grandmother and said, "They always hide theft inside charity in this town," then called a tax attorney who still owes her for a favor during hurricane season. Raphael didn't let me sit in the room when Marine's name was on the table at first, then remembered Rule 1 and waved me in. It wasn't vengeance. It was a slow, cold naming of each place the knife went in. Fake vendor approvals. Overtime skimmed from men who can't miss a shift. Donations laundered through a church that should have known better. Watching Raphael see it all was like watching a bone set without pain meds. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He said, "We will fix this, and then we will say out loud, 'We fixed it.'" And that made a bigger noise than any smashed bottle ever could. I went back to the hospital in my Navy scrubs with a badge that still scans like a dare, and asked to be scheduled on nights that needed extra eyes. Harmon didn't meet my stare often, but once, in the medication room, she did. We stood in that weird fluorescent intimacy that makes enemies closer than friends. "You made me look bad on TV," she said, blunt as an oar. "You made you look bad by talking like breathing was a hunch," I said. Not aggressive, just true. She opened her mouth to spit back, then shut it because we could both hear a code rolling toward us down the hall. "We can fight later," I said. "Or not at all." She huffed, that little sound frustrated people make when they realize momentum changed without their permission. I walked out, took a patient's hand, counted her breaths until the room remembered how to be kind. On Sunday, Raphael and I watched the Saints lose a preseason game they should have won, because some rituals should remain unaffected by crime and policy. Maya sprawled on the rug drawing pelicans with crowns, while Lucia fussed at the television like it owed her money. During halftime, Raphael brought out a folder with a new page for our kitchen binder. "River Code, Clinic Addendum," he said, and waited for me to read. It was simple. No cash gifts to hospital employees, no donations tied to favors. All support to go through a 501c3 that files in daylight. "I'm not dragging you into the mud," he said, almost to himself. "If I can keep 1 inch of the ground you stand on clean, I will." I signed under his name. My hand didn't shake. At night, I still get hit with the what ifs. What if the Riverline number gets abused by somebody looking to settle a petty score? What if we're the ones people call when we can't fix what's broken? What if handing me the lever makes me the person people blame when something breaks anyway? I sit on my porch with a glass of iced tea, listen to trains whisper through town, and let the worry have a turn without giving it the mic. Hope isn't a feeling I trust. It's a practice. It's the EMT who agreed to rotate nights at the ER because he said my niece's sign got to him. It's the captain who stapled a hotline number to a check and didn't die. It's Lucia putting a half-made ring in my hand and saying, "Shape it your way." It's Raphael telling a room of men who love him that my no is a stop sign, not a speed bump. We haven't beaten anything forever. I'm not trying to put an ending bow on a city that refuses bows. But we built something boring that matters. A code that writes down what we won't do. A phone number that turns midnight into morning. A rota that lets nurses breathe while they keep other people breathing. It isn't romantic. It isn't dramatic. It's power handed off and written down, which is the only kind I trust. When Raphael falls asleep on the porch, his head back, the cicadas still yelling, I hold the ring blank up to the porch light and feel the weight of brass that's been other things. I don't know what stones it'll hold or what shape I'll carve in it. I just know it'll fit the finger of a woman who keeps receipts and keeps her own keys. And when the river moves in the morning like it always does, I'll move with it. Not because someone's pulling, but because I finally chose the current. 3 months is enough time for a city to decide whether you were a headline or a habit. And I was determined to be the second. We kept the meetings boring on purpose. Clipboards, coffee gone cold, budget lines that looked like flat heartbeats. Because change that lasts usually wears ugly shoes. Evan took a plea that read like a laundry list of bad decisions. Misdemeanor battery, trespass, tampering with port access, no jail. Louisiana justice is allergic to certainty. But a permanent dock ban. Restitution to the bar staff he'd manhandled, and a statement under oath that he'd been at the warehouse the night my legs stopped listening to me. Patrice sent me the PDF with a note. It's not poetry, it's leverage. Marin folded too. He walked into the DA's office with hands shaking and ledgers so clean they screamed guilt. And he told the story men like him always tell between a rock and a subpoena, slow squeezes, bonus structures, a cousin at Pelican Mechanical with a key that fit too many doors. Lucia sat through every minute like a woman knitting at a trial. When he finished, She didn't ask for vengeance. She asked for payroll records and names of foremen who skinned overtime from hands they didn't know the names of. "We'll collect in daylight," she said. And I swear you could hear something old unclench. At the hospital, HR tried to come out of this like the cool aunt who shows up late to graduation and claims she bought the cap and gown. They called my review concluded and rolled out the Quinn clause in sedation protocols. A sentence line requiring a respiratory pattern check before stacking benzodiazepines on suspected opioid cases. They didn't name me in the email, but everyone knew, because nurses keep their own internet. We also got a small, quiet win I like more than memos. Security learned to ask, "May I?" before they touched a patient's elbow. That alone could save a dozen panics a year. Harmon and I found a new détente born of mutual exhaustion. She still talks like guidelines are scripture, and I still treat them like scaffolding. But after a 12-hour shift where a granddad's lungs remembered how to move because we didn't rush the cocktail, she set down a chart, looked me dead in the face, and said, "You were right to wait." She didn't offer an apology for the committee mic. I didn't ask. Some people only bend when the room is empty. That's fine, the bend still counts. Riverline rang more than any of us expected. A shrimp boat deckhand called from a payphone by a P.O. boy shop to say his teenage sister was being helped by a supervisor with a ride and rent money. We bought a bus ticket and a month in an apartment with a door that locks from the inside and a bedspread that didn't smell like someone else's cigarettes. A line cook named Thai texted in Vietnamese and English, best she could manage, about a cash skimming scam on her line. Lucia brought a labor lawyer who speaks both and who laughed once out loud when a manager tried to pretend tip credit math was confusing. We had misses, too. A Riverline call that turned out to be a cousin feud dressed in righteousness. A guy who wanted us to smooth over a warrant with a bag of sympathy. We wrote it all down, not to protect ourselves, but to remember how humans actually are. Boring accountability, over and over. Piper's audit system caught 2 more vendor anomalies before they got cute. Benoit's checklist rounds made a foreman fix a busted safety gate in front of 30 men who are never going to let him forget it. The Union Hall started keeping a stack of Riverline cards in the bathroom in a tin labeled mints, because Doc Humor dies last. And every Friday, like church, Raphael's captains got an email. Numbers, not stories. Calls received, resolved, in, progress, dollars spent, access revoked, pay restored. No victory laps, just receipts. On our side of the porch, boring did what it promised. We fought about a thermostat. We canceled a reservation because I'd had 4 codes in one shift and didn't have words left for a waiter. When a night got too loud inside his head, Raphael told me instead of going quiet and pretending nothing needed saying. When I said, "Not tonight," he put his hands in his pockets and said, "Copy," and meant it. He still runs like a man who knows a storm by smell, and I still sleep with a light on more nights than I admit. But the house breathed sound, a hum you can only hear if you've been in danger before, stayed steady. On a Sunday, he handed me a crisp copy of the memo he'd sent and posted, and said out loud to rooms that didn't want to hear it, "No operation that touches the hospital or the clinics proceeds without Nora's yes." It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a structural one. And that's how you keep a promise standing when the wind picks up. He asked again, not with skywriting or a flash mob. Thank God. He waited until I'd survived a week of nights and had real food in me and said it while we were folding towels still warm from the dryer. "Marry me," he said. And this time, he didn't pitch it like a rescue. He pitched it like a policy. We keep the code. We keep the seat at the table. We keep your rules even when it's boring. We pick a house that smells like coffee and lemon oil and not panic. I looked at the blank ring Ida had forged from the old token and thought about all the circles I've been pushed into and all the cages I've had to pick. "Okay," I said, "with conditions." He smiled like he'd been waiting to hear those words all his life and grabbed a pen the way men in love who are also problem solvers do. Rule 1 stays. Truth, even when we hate it. Rule 2, consent, always. in kitchen meetings and everything else. Rule 3, legal record first, river second. You don't make me a widow to prove a point. Rule 4, I keep my job, you keep yours. We don't become each other's only. He wrote them down on a piece of paper from the stack we keep by the grocery list and signed his name like he was buying a house. Add Rule 5, he said gently. We forgive slow. I wrote it because I wanted it as much for me as for him. We didn't throw a big wedding. I refused to feed the rumor mill more than necessary. We went down to the clerk's office in our Sunday best. Maya, in a dress with pockets, handing out beignets to strangers and sugar, cursing the floor. Lucia cried like a sprinkler, and then cut a king cake with a plastic knife on the courthouse steps. Miss Lila signed as a witness with the visor on and a grin that could power streetlights. And Mr. Clarence wore a tie he clearly hated and told me, "Don't let nobody make you late to your own piece." Ida brought the ring she'd finished the week before, a band of warm gold with the tiniest pelican etched inside, only visible when you slide it off and look. You don't need the world to see the emblem, she said. Just you. It wasn't fancy. It felt like something that would survive being dropped, slammed in a drawer, grit under a faucet. We danced later at the Union Hall to a brass trio that played everything halfway between joy and goodbye, which is the only way the city knows how to celebrate. Raphael doesn't dance so much as sway like a tugboat in a gentle cross-current. I followed because I wanted to, not because I had to. The last scene I didn't plan. Life handed it to me like a closing and an opening stitched together. Another second. Line. Hotter than the first. The street a ribbon of noise. I don't know why crowds still surprise me. Maybe I hope one day they won't. Someone bumped me. Hard. The kind of touch that makes your body forget to be a body. I flinched before my brain could talk me down. Then I saw her. A college kid. Maybe. In a two-lane T. Eyes glassy with the same math I've done in bad rooms. How do I leave without leaving my skin behind? She had both hands on her own elbows like she was holding herself together. No one else saw it. They never do until you teach them how. I stepped into that little space like a dock hand, sliding a wedge under a rolling pallet, and held up my wrist. You want to walk with me? I asked, direct like the question deserves. No pity, no story, just yes or no. She nodded so fast I felt my throat get tight. I didn't grab her. I turned my hand palm up, the ring catching light, the pelican etched inside only for me. She took it. We moved through the crowd without theatrics, just two people doing a thing the city should have done automatically. Someone started singing Eco Eco because someone always does. And a drummer lost his rhythm for a beat and found it again. When we got clear, she let go and breathed like air was a new toy. Thank you, she said, cheeks blotchy with adrenaline. I thought I was being dramatic. You were being alive, I said. I slipped a Riverline card into her back pocket like an ant would. For friends who ask you to make stupid decisions because they're bored. She nodded, a little laugh that sounded like the first day after a fever. You okay? Raphael asked when I reached him at the curb where he'd stopped on purpose to give me the walk. He didn't touch. He didn't manage. He just witnessed. Yeah, I said. I'm good. We still live with this river's mood swings. We still eat red beans on Mondays and watch the Saints lose games they should win. HR still sends emails with capitalized subject lines. The DA's office still has to fight men with money for time on a calendar. The docks still creak and complain and carry our sins along with everything else we ship. But my house breathes the way it should. My job doesn't chew me up. The code sits on a kitchen shelf in a binder with flour on it because it lives where the life lives. And when my niece asked me what love looks like in real life, not in TikToks, I pointed to the ring and to the list on the fridge and to the man who sets 2 cups by the coffee maker at night because he knows mornings are bad for me. It looks like rules we wrote together, I told her. It looks like doors that open when you push. It looks like someone choosing to witness your whole story without making himself the author. She thought about it the way kids do when they're smarter than you give them credit for and said, So, receipts. Yeah, I said, laughing, and the courage to keep them even when the room rolls its eyes. Maybe that's the moral, if stories are supposed to have those. Not that I grabbed the right hand in a crowd, though I did. Not that a man with a network changed for me, though he has and is. The point is that I learned to be the steady hand, too. The one someone else can grab without checking who it belongs to. I used to think safety meant a person who could fight. Now I think it's a practice you build with 100 small choices. Written down, neoned, underlined, boring, and beautiful. And if I ever forget, all I have to do is slide off the ring and look at the little pelican hidden inside. Old brass, reworked on purpose. Then put it back on and walk into the next crowd with my palm open. Ready.